On the line right now is Dr. Rick Timbs. The governor has recently put out his budget. Dr. Timbs, in full disclosure, is my father-in-law.
Poor guy.
Who is, suffers that label, but knows education and budgets like nobody, and on the line right now. So what do you think? Good morning, and what do you think of this budget proposal?
Well, it's certainly lacking. I know that the state has some financial issues that it's dealing with. But at the same time, there is a constitutional obligation by the state to support schools. And I've got to tell you that his distribution is very lackluster, especially in our area.
Yeah. What do you think of he's putting money into elsewhere? So they're putting money back into the foundation aid, but at the same time, he's directing money towards pre-K. What are your thoughts on that?
Well, the dilemma we've got, I think everybody would love to have a pre-K program, but it's not mandated, and neither is kindergarten for that matter. But at the same time, we need operating aid to keep the schools operating on alone. I mean, Many of the schools in our area are getting operating aid increases below even the rate of inflation. They're a little over 1%. There's a couple of exceptions, but it's pretty rare in our area.
And this basic is really what we're talking about. We're talking about property values. And property values here are certainly not as high as other places throughout the state, which means we end up being funded inadequately, right?
Right, exactly, inadequately. I think there's an attempt to get some equity across the state. In other words, get the money to where it's needed the most, it seems like. But it looks like we've been shorted on that little thing. And the thing is because the amount of money is not enough. I mean, you're looking at some of the districts in our region that are getting very, very little in terms of increase in foundation aid, the basic aid that runs all school districts.
Yeah.
So that itself is a real problem.
It seems like we have this every year, and it might have been 3 years ago. Manaski was saying, "Boy, this same argument every year in, year out. We seem to have the same issue." What can people do? Can you contact your legislators, contact Assemblyman Brindisi and Senator Griffo and Brian Miller and all of those guys and say, hey, this is what we need?
Oh, yeah, absolutely. Matter of fact, that's what you really got to do. I think what you're going to find is that when you start putting pressure on legislators, I think they do rise to the occasion. I mean, for instance, let me just give you a couple of examples here. For instance, Clinton their foundation increase is $72,000 for the entire year. New York Mills is about $56,000 for the entire year. Riscony $69,000. Sequoia Valley $94,000 just in foundation aid. Waterville $95,000. Westmoreland about $85,000 almost. So it's not like we're dealing with a huge amount of money that they're sending to these schools to help support them. You also have to remember that incomes and property values here are depressed. I mean, we don't have a lot of high-paying jobs and a lot of very, very valuable property. So therefore, we don't really have a lot to tax. Tax cap, I think, luckily, with the tax cap, it has suppressed taxes down, but it's made all school districts state aid dependent. In other words, when that state aid doesn't come in, school districts have financial issues.
What do you say to? I mean, anytime I have you on, we always hear, whether it's in social media or somebody calls in and says, "Well, listen, we've thrown money at the problem." I mean, there's going to be a couple of things you can answer here. We've thrown money at the problem; it just doesn't work. We've got to stop throwing money at these schools. There's more money thrown towards given to New York schools than anywhere else in the country, and we're one of the worst performing states when it comes to education. So have at it.
Well, sure. There's a lot of studies out there that says money does make a difference, so that's a fallacy. That's number one. I mean, it's easy to say, but try running a school without money. It's just not going to work. But, we have higher standards than many other states. There's a lot more expectations in New York State for kids learning than they are. For instance, you compare us to, say, many southern states. I mean, our education system is premier. That's probably why it costs more. The other thing is that there's massive amounts of laws and regulations and mandates that govern New York State schools. You walk into a school, and you'll see every so many feet a defibrillator screwed to the wall in all these schools and all these buildings. Fire extinguishers. The corridors have to be so wide. The ceiling has to be made of this material and so on. And there's a ton of these types of things. They're actually talking about putting cameras, requiring cameras on school buses in New York State so they can catch the people who are passing the school bus. Well, that's going to cost a good chunk of change. So therefore, the cost of our buses go up. Take a look at those buses. They've got lights on them, and they've got a sign that comes out that says stop. All those things mandated in New York State, and therefore they cost more. But our educational system, it does well. Matter of fact, one of our big problems is that we do so well that our people can get jobs anywhere in the United States, and they do.
I want to ask also, there is a difference when it comes to funding for Utica versus the other school districts because they're a part of the. Maybe you can explain it because I don't understand it.
Well, Utica is probably one of the most impoverished school districts in New York State. I think they're like in the top 5 in terms of high poverty. So therefore, what will happen is their funding will be significantly greater than other schools. But also, they have a larger number of students in one place. So their enrollment is much higher, so therefore their funding is higher. But Utica and a whole bunch of these schools are actually a part of a lawsuit against the state of New York as a result of a previous lawsuit in the state of New York that was won by New York City that says schools were inadequately funded. And the state started to fund those districts more properly in 2007-8, then they increased it in 2008-9, and then they started withdrawing funds a few years later, and many schools haven't caught up, and even the ones that have caught up, it still hasn't kept track with inflation and mandated costs. So there's a continuing legal issue here of which Utica is actually helping to sue the state because there's a constitutional provision in New York State's Constitution that says the state should support schools and provide enough funds for a sound basic education. New York State has never, on average, paid, I think it's more than 48% of the cost of schools, even though they have all these mandates.
Yeah.
So it gets a little silly, and it's down now near 40% or 38%, something like that.
All right, finally, I want. So it is different. Utica.
It is different, right?
Finally, a little trivia here, and maybe I'm right, maybe I'm wrong, maybe Manasseh can get this. So you said that pre-K is not mandated. We know that. Kindergarten, not mandated. There's another grade that is not mandated by New York State, and what do you think it is, Manasseh? Which grade beyond kindergarten is not mandated?
12th.
Is it 12th?
Well, here's how it works. Technically speaking, what you have to do is provide enough. They have to pass certain Regents courses to be able to graduate. It is certainly possible. If you just brought it down to reading, writing, and math, you could probably get most kids out of school by 11th grade, hypothetically.
Right.
But the big problem is they're still immature. There's still a lot of learning going, but that would just provide them with the most basic of educations. So if you really want to get kids to a 21st century school, you'll find a lot of these schools are getting into advanced placement courses to get college credit. They do programs with other colleges to get college credit and so on. And in many schools, that's really what 12th grade is used for, so that they're more prepped for advanced education, whether it be for skills and trades through a BOCES program and or an academic program. So while 12th grade itself isn't like saying you have to have 12th grade, I think we always use 12th grade to make that transition between regular public school and then higher ed or advanced trade.
Very interesting, Dr. Timbs. We appreciate your time.
You're welcome. Have a great day.
All right.